Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so happy you guys joined us here today. Thank you so much for joining. We have a great topic. We're going to be talking about Windows 11 and devices that are powered by Intel vPro. To go ahead and do that, I've got two wonderful speakers joining me once again from back from last week. He came back for more. Mitch Doctor is with us again. Mitch, how's it going?
I'm good, right? It's like you can't get rid of me, Chris. I don't know what's
No,
going on.
you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. Wouldn't
Oh,
have it any
thanks,
other
sir.
way. But joining us today, we have someone even better. Sorry, I'm just gonna say she's even better.
Ouch.
We have Tracy Taylor here. She is the enterprise client technical specialist for Intel. Tracy, how's it going?
Fabulous. Really excited to be here. And now I feel all kinds of pressure with your Mitch comment.
No.
No, no. That you know now I feel awful for saying that. I don't. You guys are
No, you don't.
equally awesome. Before we get started here, I want to kind of walk you guys through the dashboard real quick. If you guys have any questions throughout Tracy and Mitch's presentation, you go ahead and ask them in the question box here. We also have a bunch of resources available for you guys to kind of go through throughout the presentation. They'll also be available after the fact as well. So if you have any more questions or comments and you're looking for more resources, those are available to you. But with that, we've got a lot of cover in about an hour. So, Mitch, I believe you're going to get started. So why don't you take us away?
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. And let's jump right in. We are going to use the slides here in the slide manager, so feel free to please follow along with us. And I think the biggest thing we're going to talk about is, let me go back. What are we talking about? Well, we're going to talk about Windows 11 Pro. Yes, again, a little bit more, a little bit here and there. We'll touch on a little bit different pieces, but specifically what our partnership looks like with Intel, of course, as a Silicon partner, and that's why Tracy's and I are both here along, and we'll talk about how vPro and Windows 11 Pro really mesh together to give you the best levels of both power, productivity, and of course, everybody's favorite, security, because that's why everybody is here every day anyway, right? So one, I think just setting up that context and having everybody understand that in case you weren't aware, hybrid work isn't going anywhere. It is definitely here. It is a permanent fixture of our everyday work life now. People are working in more places across more devices than ever before, and new workers going into the job market or moving from one businesses to the other. As we all know, there's a lot of fluidity in the job market as is at the moment. They're looking and I'm sorry, workers are looking within the organizations they're looking at going to into flexible work options, right? So being able to have their own devices or getting brand new devices or state-of-the-art devices. At the moment, we know 52% of employees are considering going hybrid or mobile within the year we're physically sitting in right now. And remote workers are, again, well, they feel like they're part of the business, but they're not. How can we better include them, and how can we use technology to make sure that they are? And I know this is a crazy statistic, and this is from 2020, so imagine what this specific statistic is right now. But we're looking at an increase in weekly time spent in meetings, more than 250% than just in 2020 pre-pandemic. So imagine the type of times we're spending in those meetings today. It's pretty incredible stuff. So what is Windows 11 doing here? Well, one, we're looking at increasing engagement to those employees, making sure that they're in workspaces that work for them. They're intelligent, they're inclusive, meaning anybody can pick up a Windows 11 Pro device and get right to work. We're making sure that the information access on those devices matters. And it also means that we're looking at where threats come from within the organizational environments. Look at me tripping over my words all day.
It's a big combination of words there. I get it.
It's a lot of words, right? But we want to make sure that employees have that flexibility that they need in their devices while still making sure that those devices are secure from the get-go. And we'll talk a lot more about that kind of security piece along with Intel vPro and how that all kind of measures up. And we want to help cost be cut, and we want to look at the complexity of cost and how many vendors are you using and how many devices and how many of those are quote unquote old devices, 4+ year old devices that are ending up costing you more money instead of going to new devices, for instance. So let's go ahead and talk about what these old devices mean. So when we talk about old devices, we're talking about Windows 10 devices, something typically within the 10, within Windows 10 or 4 to 5 years or plus old. So these are what we refer to as a older device. And when we think of these older devices, they are statistically leaving organizations open to far more threats, significantly. We know that security decision makers, IT decision makers, IT, so on and so forth, they're saying, like, at this point, more than 85% of them are like, hey, you know what? Using these old devices and just going to a new antivirus is not enough to protect me against the threats that are out there today. And they're not going to be able to protect me against the new and upcoming threats. So what do? Well, aging hardware has to see, unfortunately, the light of day and start looking at what new devices can do for us with new hardware. And then finally, we know that security decision makers and IT decision makers with devices existing anywhere or bring your own device, how do we make sure all those individual devices are secure, whether they're secure from an individual user or if they're stolen, what happens to the data and those type of things. And we are brought Windows 11 together to do just that. But not only that, but we also want Windows 11 not to just give you a better security posture, but we also want it to help you save money. You go, how does buying a bunch of brand new devices help me save money, Mitch? That's preposterous. That makes no sense whatsoever, right?
You gotta spend money to make money, man.
Spend money to make it, right? It's all about it. So how do we get this money back in your pocket, and how do we look at a return of investment? We had Forrester actually released a study back in end of February of earlier this year, and they looked at what a company would do if they went to Windows 11 Pro devices by replacing all old devices. And they saw that this example of replacing, say, 2,000 devices in a mid-market company, by replacing 2,000 devices just to Windows 11 Pro, they returned their investment back into their pocket in as little as 6 months. And when extrapolated out, they saw within 3 years that they can get a return of investment of almost 250%. You're going to go, what in the world? Where do these numbers come from? Well, they come from a couple big things. Number one, a 20% reduction in overall security attacks. That's successful attacks, not attacks in general, but attacks being successful. So a 20% reduction in successful attacks means more time for IT to focus on other things like being proactive against what the next threat might be. One of the largest and craziest numbers to me, and it still boggles my mind every time I say it, is an 80% reduction in help desk tickets.
That's the one that boggles my mind as well. It's crazy.
And it's insane. And then you're going to go, how's that possible? So, Chris, I know you run some of D&H's IT teams and whatnot and desk help, right?
Yep.
How would you love if I can help you reduce all your help desk tickets 80%?
I would like that for the sanity of my people. Because sometimes it's like drinking from a fire hose.
Very much so. So how many, and do you know what percent of help desk tickets typically in real world is something as simple as resetting a password or getting locked out of something or being able to, oh, what was that email address? Or, oh, I typed this wrong. Can this return? It's pretty large percentage. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
I would guess it's over 50%.
I agree. It's probably closer to 65% of most tickets. So if we can alleviate those tickets with Windows 11 Pro and vPro even at this matter, because things are automated and self-service within the environment. So being able to change your password is as simple as literally going into Windows 11 and hitting change password, going to your company site and doing it all self-service. Would you say just something as simple as self-service password changing would take a load off of your IT teams?
That would take a load off of everyone's IT teams. It's just to be able to take any task that is basically remedial. They're just going in there. They have to do it themselves. It's an authentication thing. I can't speak today. You gave it to me.
It's you and me both, buddy.
Yeah, it's been a long month, guys. To be able to take that and offload it to something else, then it's just not something you don't even have to worry about anymore as an IT professional. That's amazing right there.
And time is, of course, what, Chris and Tracy?
Money,
right?
and you
Time's
have to spend
money,
it to
and
make
that's
it.
where we're getting this huge ROI from, right? The other big one is around deployment, and I know we're not going to talk a ton about deployment today, but working with Chris and the team at D&H, being able to incorporate Windows 11 Pro into Autopilot and modern management is a huge step forward in making sure that that time goes into the individual user and employees and being able to get them right to work and being far more productive without twiddling their thumbs waiting for a computer to work so they can work. And with that, Tracy, I know that you also have some where vPro kind of comes in. So can you tell us a little bit more about how vPro is really changing the game for our business customers, especially when they're running 11 Pro and brand new modern devices?
Yeah, and I think, while it wasn't 80% on the last slide, one of the big things that jumps out to me is the 20% reduction in security incidents with Windows 11. If you think about just the overall cost of a successful security breach in a customer's organization, it's significantly impactful in lots of different facets. So when we talk about Windows 11, especially Windows 11 on vPro platforms, there's lots of different benefits, and we're going to do a deeper dive on all of those. But certainly, security is foundational first and foremost. And there's, I think, right around 36 different security technologies that Intel bakes into our vPro platform. So I'm going to go to the next slide and kind of describe for the folks that aren't as familiar with vPro exactly what it is and some of the different pillars of it. So really vPro, I always describe it as a technical specification that goes across the entire platform. So it's a lot more than just a processor. And when OEMs meet that specification, they get to put the vPro sticker on their device. So I talked about the 36 different security technologies, but there's 3 other pillars that make up vPro that your customers get. So one, we've got the performance pillar. And your customers know that when they buy vPro, that it's built for and really the best for business. So there's a lot of different components that are part of that platform to drive productivity and user experience. Manageability is really the pillar where vPro was founded some 17 years ago. And we'll talk a little bit about that more too, but this is really where we can take some of the great features of Windows 11 and extend the support to that even outside of Windows 11. And then the stability pillar is, again, from a business perspective, where we do extensive platform validation across multiple versions of Windows 10, but more importantly, Windows 11 for our customers and your customers, so that when they buy that device, they're not going to have to get a corporate image configured, start deploying it, and then roll out new graphics or wireless drivers. So we commit to a 15-month buying cycle during a 15-month window where we're not releasing new drivers to align into that buying cycle. So lots of features that are built into that business platform to really enable your customers from both experience, productivity, but also give them the security and stability and manageability that they need. I'm popping to the next slide there.
No, we're good. So I think what we see, and when we think of security in general, and security is, a huge facet and probably the #1 facet when it comes to talking about businesses today. It used to be for a very long time, it was all about show me be more productive, make my staff more productive, give me computers that are more powerful, I want more speed. And it's not the case as much as it was even just pre-pandemic and pre-work from home. Now with everything moving and our end devices and our endpoints literally existing anywhere we can exist, which again is everywhere, the case for security is huge. And you're going to go, but why do I need a new device? And why a modern device? There's a couple big reasons as to why. And I think we kind of already alluded to a couple of those. But it's because these older hardware devices, even 3, 4, 5 years old, are not modern enough for the new level of security that's necessary. So as you can see here, when we combine Windows 11 Pro with a modern hardware like an Intel vPro platform processor, the idea is that we need to have things like recognizing how a trusted platform module 2.0 technologies on the chipset along with the vPro processor, how it brings a better level of security overall to the operating system, to the encryption of the data that's on there, and how that encryption even follows itself all the way up to the cloud and how we can realize that. We're also seeing that SDMs here believe, again, software alone's not enough. We need hardware and new modern hardware to be able to protect us against even future and emerging threats. I want you to think before I turn this slide over is that there was over 1.1 billion URLs set up just for phishing this year.
Well, and I think if you go back to
Like,
kind of adding on to that
crazy.
a little bit around the security piece of it, I mentioned 36 or 3 dozen different technologies that Intel's got that make up the vPro, and all of that is, you know, different security features. And so, we're continuously innovating and adding new technologies. And a lot of that has been added in the last few years. I mean, to the point, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but if you compare the attack surface space on a 13th gen device against the attack surface space on a device that's just 4 years old, 4 years older, it's reduced by 70% on those new devices. So it's a significant, again, continuously innovating, adding features, working with Microsoft and other partners to improve things. So that kind of goes back to your question on why you need a modern device.
Exactly. And then Tracy, the big question goes, cool, proof's in the pudding. Prove it to me. Well, businesses are providing numbers with up to a 60% drop in overall security instances by just going to a Windows 11 Pro device. That's it. All they're doing is going from 10 to 11, and they're providing feedback of seeing almost 60% drop in overall security instances. And this is thanks to a couple of those things. One, the security out of the box idea that for the very first time, a Windows 11 Pro device has all the extra layers of security that are already turned on that weren't initially turned on in Windows 10. You had to do IT and manage and policies and this and that. And you had to be in 15 different places, and you had to know which switches to turn on, what to turn off. But all of that by default out of the box is now activated, including things like virtual-based security. And we'll talk a little bit about that here a little bit later. But just know that just because of all that new out of the box and everything being turned on, along with modern hardware like a vPro platform processor, we're seeing a 3.1 reduction in firmware attacks. That's 3.1, not percent, but 3.1 times a reduction in firmware attacks. This goes also forward into some of our advanced security and hybridization work that businesses, along with Windows Hello for Business, when also a common misconception, folks don't realize that all the biometrics and the PIN codes and all of that we use, being able to use Windows Hello for Business with our faces and with our fingerprints, all that is also information that is backed up and put onto the Intel processor, as well as that TPM 2.0 chip that works alongside it. So all of that information is encrypted on board, on-prem, on each individual device. We're seeing again, an almost 3 times reduction in fewer instances of identity theft. And then modern security management, like we already kind of alluded to, just works, right? It is able to go up to the cloud, and we can manage all these policies no matter where these endpoints truly do exist.
Perfect. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit because I think it's important for the folks on the call here. Well, security is certainly first and foremost. I do want to hit on when we talk about vPro and business and 13th generation. I do want to hit on a couple of other things. So let's talk about Intel Threat Director, because this is important for your customers, especially when you're talking about moving from Windows 10 to Windows 11. So with the 12th generation, Intel had a big architectural shift, and we moved to this hybrid architecture. So we've now got these P cores and these E cores. And with Microsoft, we've developed and we've got the Threat Director. And so Threat Director is baked into the kernel of Windows. And what I want to point out, and I make sure I talk to every customer about, is Threat Director, while it's great in what it does with Windows 10, as your customers move to Windows 11, there's some additional features that are available that's going to drive and improve performance. And certainly the level of performance is going to vary based on the workload. But this is a great slide here that shows how Threat Director works, and I'll summarize it really quickly for you. So in Windows 10, Threat Director will make that core assignment between your P core and your E core, just based on where an application is running. So if it's in the foreground, it's going to go one place. In the background, it'll go elsewhere. In Windows 11, we leverage some really cool things like AI and machine learning, and we use that to assign a class to each process or thread And then it gets even more effective as that machine learning kicks in and gets smarter about what you're using, how you're working for that core assignment. So, there's some different numbers I've seen, but anywhere from 3 to 6% performance improvement just on the processor side of it. But I've even heard rumblings and talked to other customers that have seen, greater performance, especially for some of those users that have higher compute requirements. So again, just a talking point as you're having conversations with customers on that move to Windows 11, that there's certainly some performance gains to be seen there that are enabled on the Intel side of the
Tracy,
house.
real quick before we move on, can you explain what a P core and what an E core is for those who have not seen
Yes,
the
I
latest
didn't.
and greatest from Intel?
Yeah, I didn't want to go all the way down that rabbit hole, but I am happy
But I
to
think
talk
it's
about it. So,
important for this specific conversation because I think
I
what you're
agree.
talking about here, it means a lot more when you're on the older hardware if you don't know what a P and an E core is.
yeah, so the hybrid architecture, it was a big shift for us when we went to 12th gen. In the 13th gen, we've just improved upon that. So essentially, you've got your CPU, and now instead of just having all the same type of core, we've got performance cores and efficient cores. And essentially, your performance cores are where you're going to run those single-threaded, high compute requirement things, and then your multi-threaded, some of the background things, which, if you've ever opened your task manager, you know that there's a whole heck of a lot of those that are running. Those are going to
Yep.
run on your E-cores. And from a compute sizing or space requirements, we can fit 4 E-cores in the same amount of space that we can fit a single P-core. So it essentially is just kind of expanding what we can do at the processing level within the CPU.
So on an older hardware that don't have those efficiency cores, this background tasks that are doing threat detector would be primarily ran on the performance cores, which could have effect on your other processes that you're
Yeah,
running. Correct?
yeah, exactly. We're just expanding the number of cores that are available by adding the E cores. And I'm going to call you out only because I promise I'm going to do this later. You said threat detector, whereas it's actually threat director.
Rector. Sorry,
It's crazy
you're
that
right.
Intel came out with both of those names the same year because I swear to you, every conversation I go into, I mix them up at least one time. So it warms my heart to see you do it too.
Good. I'm great at mixing up names. Ask my kids. They get
Oh,
yelled
yeah.
at like they're my dog all the time. So
No, but hopefully that was a good that helped to describe
oh
what it is,
yes,
the
yes,
benefit of it.
absolutely.
Again, another one of those reasons why and I'm just going to build this slide out. Why we want to talk to customers and some of the gains they're going to see with Windows 11. Another big opportunity for your customers to move to Windows 11 is the support of Wi-Fi 6E, which essentially adds a number of different channels that weren't available before for kind of capacity and throughput. So that's a big difference. And what's great about that when they move to Windows 11 is it automatically detects that it's on 6E and they gain the benefits from that. And so that's something that was available on 12th gen and certainly is going to be available going forward. The other two pieces that I always talk to everybody about is there's some software that's part of the OEM loads on vPro machines. And why it's important is because we recognize that very few customers are going to leverage the OEM load that comes from Dell, HP, or Lenovo. They're going to create their own corporate image, pull all of that OEM stuff off of it, and then deploy it, which makes sense, and that's certainly best practices. However, one of those OEM software packages is new, and it's started last year. It's called Intel Connectivity Performance Suite, or at Intel, we go acronym crazy. We call it ICPS. So your customers can, if they've deleted it off the image or don't have it, they can certainly go and download it from Intel.com. But what ICPS does and where it's going to add value for customers, especially as you're looking at performance or experience from an end user perspective, is typically when a device or a laptop connects to its access point, it's going to connect to the closest access point. With ICPS, it's now looking at a number of different data points to determine what's the best access point to connect to, or do I need to transition seamlessly between access points? So it's not just looking at the proximity, but also the congestion, the security, what version of Wi-Fi is it, and the signal strength. So all of that gets pulled together, and then it determines where to go. The other big piece of this that can offer some serious performance gains for the end users is it will prioritize Wi-Fi traffic. So take an example where I'm on a Teams call, sharing PowerPoint, and have my video running. It'll prioritize that wireless traffic over, let's say, a Power BI app that's running in the background or other background things. So your customers or their end users are going to see up to a 66% decrease in latency. And so I think about that, and I go back to one of the initial metrics that you shared around 252% increase in Teams meetings. And there's a lot of value that can be gained there, especially as your customers are supporting all of those remote and hybrid workers that are all over the place. And your customers don't necessarily have visibility into their home networks or all of these external networks and how well they're performing. So that's a really important piece when we talk about Windows 11 and the vPro platform and some of the benefits that we can bring. And I'm going to go to the next slide because we've hit a little bit on the performance and some of the things there from an experience perspective. The other piece, and I want to make sure I hit on, because this is really where vPro was born, is in the management and the management capabilities. So, we've got what we call out-of-band management, and there's some different capabilities that we provide there. So certainly we work really closely with Microsoft and Windows when we think about things from a modern management. But we all know, and I would be the first to say, that you're not going to see this as often in Windows 11 as you may have in Windows 10. But as you think about how your customers are supporting their hybrid or remote users, typically, when they have an issue that requires IT support, what they'll do or be able to do is remote into those devices. But what happens when those remote users have an issue where Windows isn't up and running, or they need to go out and monitor, do firmware updates, kind of going back to some of the firmware attacks that were mentioned earlier? That's where some of Intel's modern management capabilities can really add value for your customers. So as part of that specification, we had some additional firmware called, back to the acronyms again, Active Management Technology, or AMT. And what this does is this gives your customers the ability to have a secure hardware encrypted channel from an IT device, or from IT to the end device. So if Windows isn't up and running, you can get to that device and remotely manage it, whether it's power the device on or be able to have a hardware-based KVM session to do things like go into the BIOS, repair Windows, reload Windows. So there's a lot of additional capabilities that Intel and vPro systems bring to the table for your customers when we talk about overall manageability. Now, there's a couple of other things that I want to hit on for manageability. So one is, we talked about the firmware. Intel also provides free of charge software. When I say free of charge, there's no licensing now or ever for it. Software for customers to use to turn on or enable this active management technology and then take advantage of its features. And that's Intel Endpoint Management Assistant. And so what's happened over the years, because again, this is 17 years old, what's happened over the years is, we've taken what was previously a rather complex process and really streamlined it and moved it to the cloud. So Emma is that software package, again, that Intel provides to customers and partners to take advantage of that remote or kind of modern manageability. So again, it gives your customers the ability to do a hardware-based KVM. So if there's blue screens, or they want to monitor autopilot loads, or even really something as simple as having to enter a BitLocker credential. Like, I don't know if you've ever had to call the service desk to have them give you the 30-digit BitLocker code, but it's a painful process. So that's where that hardware-based KVM is. And then unattended system control is giving you the ability to take control or manage one of those remote devices that may not have an end user in front of it. So you don't have to authenticate or gain approval for access. So lots of different features and capabilities when we think about manageability and modern manageability that Intel brings to the table with the vPro platforms. And the last thing I'll mention is because it's been around for some time, we've got a large number of different ISVs that have integrated or pulled in some of these capabilities into their platforms. And so that's listed down there in the bottom. So at this point, hopefully I've done a decent job of summarizing what vPro is, some of those different pillars and key features and benefits that your customers can recognize. I want to go back into the security piece, because there are some really cool metrics that came out right when we launched the Raptor Lake, and we'll hit on this, and then I think we're going to go much deeper into the security piece. So, we had, Mitch had some great great information at the start of this around just the impact and the cost and all of that different stuff around security. So when your customers are looking at updating or moving to a modern device with the 13th core processors, again, going back to the 36 different technologies, some of those key technologies, and we'll hit on them a little bit later, but one is the threat detection technology. And with that threat detection technology, your customers, it's got a 93% efficacy in detecting top ransomware. So it not just detects, but we work with ISVs in order to remediate. And certainly one of those, Microsoft is one of those. So we integrate with Microsoft Defender. The other thing with that threat detection technology is that it's 24% better than software alone. So again, this is just for customers that are buying vPro today, or customers that are certainly very security focused, which for the most part is just about everybody. This is, again, leveraging that hardware to provide a more holistic kind of end-to-end view of security, and taking advantage of some of the hardware-based security that Intel bakes into the platform. The other key things that I'll point out here, and some of this aligns certainly into what Mitch had talked about earlier, but we talked about Windows 11 and the decrease in security breaches there. The same thing can be said when we talk about decrease in security breaches on vPro systems. So there's a 26% decrease there, and the same type of efficiencies can be seen around 17% for the security team. Again, it's likely due to the fact that they've got fewer breaches. And then in the event that they are impacted, it's 21% less impactful. And I'm going to just kind of summarize again, because I think it's oh so important. When you're comparing devices, whether a brand new device against one that's 4 years old, your attack surface space has been reduced by 70%. Like that's really impactful when you think about all of the different security incidents, that are in the news on a daily basis. So lots of value that can be brought, not just from Windows 11, but when you tie Windows 11 into the vPro platform.
And then thank you so much, Tracy. That's awesome. I love the integration and where vPro really brings us into a modern device and really secures that whole idea of what is a modern device, why we need modern devices, and then how it truly gives that security out of the box experience that we're looking for all end users and organizations that are going ahead and moving into Windows 11. And I know we talked about earlier that Windows 11 and security specifically is the #1 investment area when it comes to organizations and end users and buyers all over the place at the moment, because of how much the world and our hybrid work world has truly changed. Microsoft, of course, has also made a priority with security in mind in a couple different ways. But I know that you also have some more security out of the box, and where vPro comes in and adds to this equation even more so than just Windows itself.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend hours just talking about those security features, but essentially what we're going to do is just hit on a couple of the really important ones, or perhaps we say more impactful. So there are so many features that what we do is we kind of roll them all under one umbrella called Hardware Shield, and then we break them into different categories. So I think it's really important for customers to recognize that when they buy vPro from a security perspective, most of this stuff is really turned on and enabled right out of the box. So it's not like that manageability where you have to, turn it on or install additional software. So when we look at the below the OS part or features from a security perspective, this is really where we're protecting the firmware and providing that kind of attestation to the operating system that it is what it says it is, and validating it. This is really an important piece when you think about how to mitigate or prevent some of those firmware attacks that have come up a couple of different times. And again, this is turned on and enabled right out of the box, from the OEM perspective. As we move up that stack, so when we look at application and data protections, this is where different virtualization technology. So there's lots of different capabilities where we do isolation, encapsulation, virtualization, all of those different things within the operating system. We do a lot within Windows 10, but you're spot on there when you talk about Windows 11 being more secured, because we do even more within Windows 11. In fact, there's some security features tied, in 12th and 13th gen that aren't even available on the Windows 10 platform. So you have to have Windows 11, which again speaks to some of the value of moving to Windows 11, especially from a security perspective. And then at the top of that stack is our advanced threat protection. And this is a newer category. And this is typically where it requires integration from an ISV. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and talk about the threat detection technology, because Intel is, this is probably one of my favorite features. We're the first and the only that have telemetry baked into the silicon where we can determine or detect when ransomware or cryptojacking software is running. And it's been out there for a number of different years, but what's changed is in the last couple of years, different ISVs are now on board and collecting this information. So they're pulling the signals from the hardware so that they can then remediate or quarantine it. And certainly Microsoft Defender is one of the biggest and one of the ones that takes advantage of this today. So there's a lot of different security, and this kind of walks through the different levels of where it's used and what it looks like.
So I know we've talked a lot about our partnership and how everything works together. So where'd that go? Oh no, I did. What else is new? So where do you see Intel and Microsoft? Of course I did, right? What else is new? It's like going Friday. It's not, but it feels like one, right? It's crazy.
It's Friday Eve.
Yes, Friday Eve.
It's Friday Eve, right? So where else do you specifically see Intel working along with Microsoft, and where does the vPro platform really come into play if we think really high level here?
So this is a great slide because it's really confusing even for me, and I work at Intel, because there's so many different technologies. So Intel brands and calls it one thing. OEMs will pick up different pieces and sometimes even rebrand it into their own platform. So this is a great view when we talk about, hey, this is how Microsoft and how they apply the layers and the different components from chip to cloud from a security perspective. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, this shows the overlaying Intel or the enabling supporting technologies that we have out there or include to enable and drive these security features. Again, whether it's from a remediation perspective all the way into the cloud or in different parts of the operating system.
Which I think is huge, right? When we think of, Microsoft and Windows 11's first idea about security from chip to cloud, and how do we go from the hardware to the OS to how do we choose applications and identity and privacy and how we make this all happen. Intel with vPro processors truly help empower and enable Windows 11 Pro devices with the most modern silicon hardware that allows for all of this to actually and truly take place.
Yeah, and it's turned on right out of the box. And the other thing that your customers will get with a vPro platform is, vPro devices don't just meet, but they exceed the Windows 11 secured core PC requirements. Exactly. And it's all due to the different technologies that are represented here, as well as some additional ones on the slide.
Yeah, there's a lot layered in there. And then let's go to the Microsoft side, because this is really our chip to cloud. As it's evolved in Windows 11, because Windows 11, I hate to break it to you, is not new anymore, everybody, right? Windows 11 is about to celebrate its 3rd anniversary in a matter of weeks. Absolutely incredibly crazy to even think about that it's already 3 years old. And a lot of where Intel, and as you saw from Tracy, that a lot of the security and the aspects that Intel vPro adds onto a Windows 11 Pro modern device is throughout all of these big features. And the biggest one, and probably the most controversial one when we even started speaking about Windows 11, was around the hardware requirements and what those hardware requirements would look like, not just the silicon and the processor and the version of the processor itself, but the availability and necessity of having trusted platform module 2.0 technologies associated to that. And then, of course, identity and privacy and security, and being able to go completely passwordless now than we ever had before, right? And the idea of throwing all of our passwords out the window and never really needing them again. And that's a big thanks to a lot of the different technologies, both from the Silica as well as other OEM partners, being able to make sure all of that can happen for all of our customers and end users. And then this goes all the way up to the cloud, as well as protecting the OS and the application itself and the applications that run on Windows. So let's dig a little bit harder into the hardware-based security because I think it's really, really important. Beside the TPM 2.0 technologies, right, that trusted platform module, so to maybe make it as simple as possible, that TPM chip is literally a literally a different processor that's next to the Intel Silica. It is still Intel technologies and it's still all together. But the idea of this processor is to be the security brain of the entire individual device. This is where things like all the BitLocker encryption goes, all the encryption into all of your biometrics, your Windows Hello, all your Windows Hello information, your PIN codes, and all that runs off of there. The other big addition, which is not here on the slide specifically, but it helps enable secure core PCs along with an Intel processor, is the necessity of having an SSD or a solid state hard drive or NVMe drive. These drives, of course, use UEFI BIOS, and having the kind of the conjunction between a UEFI BIOS and the TPM technologies together allow us to have the most secure boot PCs available, as well as do some really cool virtualized based security. Now, Tracy alluded to how we virtualize and how we containerize and we make this into a bubble and this. So I'm going to try and simplify this as much as possible here in the next minute. But let's take Windows 10 in your older device, right? We talked about surface area availability. This example kind of covers all of that. Ready? I have a pot of soup, and I know Chris is probably laughing because he's heard me do this example before, but I think it fits really nicely.
I'm ready this time. I'm ready this time, though.
You're ready. I know. He's psyched. So, Chris, we're making a soup together. Cool? And
sure.
In your soup of Windows 10 is all of your files. So all of your documents, all of your pictures, that bad email that you grabbed earlier that you clicked the link and it infected your entire
Thanks,
system,
Todd
but
Bell.
You don't know about it. But there also your registry files are there and all the integrity files and all your credentials and everything's in this pot of soup. Great, right?
Yep, absolutely.
But your soup is now tainted. Right?
Yes,
because
it's now tainted because I clicked on Todd Bell's phishing email, and now I have to take a 2-week course at D&H for...
There you go, right? Really fun. And then we'll go one step further, right? 20% of employees today clicked on a phishing email. 20% of all employees clicked on some type of phishing email today.
Yep.
So we're off to a great start. Chris is 1 of 5 today. Congratulations, Chris. So let's take that soup, and what are we going to do with that soup today?
what are we gonna do with the soup that's got the phishing emails?
Yeah. Now what? Yeah. Now that it's infected with malware, now it's tainted.
Oh, we gotta throw it out. It's tainted.
We gotta throw out the whole thing.
Yeah.
And this kind of represents that old PC that unfortunately the integrity of that PC is now infected and has very much in the past turned into a paperweight. And I think we can all, we've all probably had those experiences. I know, Chris, you and I have talked about it at length that it's not a great experience, right? When we're losing devices or devices are now just a pretty paperweight and we end up spending more money. Yeah. The flip side is what Windows 11 can do, partnered with silicon hardware like Intel vPro that have these TPM technologies and work hand in hand with UEFI BIOS and secure PC. So let's take that same pot, all of your emails and everything and files and folders and whatnot, everything's in that pot. But now we have virtualized all the firmware, the registry files, all the boot, all the credentials and everything. So instead of them all in the soup, I now hold them in a pitcher. I'm going to take that picture. I'm going to constantly add them into the soup. Now, so all the registry and all the important stuff, is it still affecting the soup? Sure. Yep. Right. But now if the soup is tainted, have all my registry and the integrity of my PC been affected if it's physically not touching the soup below it? Absolutely not. And that's the idea of this virtualized based security. It's physically separate, yet still positively affecting what's in there. And the idea here is this keeps the integrity and the security of that PC still what it is at the ground level, at the foundation of that PC, and would allow it to therefore be sent to IT, worked on, and hopefully returned to work in not very long time, right? And we can get that device back into somebody's hands. So we've gone one more, and we've done a lot of different technologies on being proactive against things like, I don't know, Chris clicking on a phishing link today. And one
I want to say
further,
for transparency, I have not been caught in like over 2 decades. I'm just joking.
Okay. 2 decades, right. You know. yesterday.
Yeah,
That just,
yesterday. You know,
yesterday.
sometimes yesterday and 2 decades, it feels like the same thing.
It's all the same thing, right? So what we have as part of Windows 11 is Smart Screen and Defender Smart Screen. It's really cool that it's not just phishing and emails anymore. Phishing's gotten extremely, extremely successful. Like we talked about, there's over 1.1 billion URLs set up just for phishing, and this includes things like cloned websites. So cloning and hijacking websites is a pretty large threat, especially when we think of it inside of an application that we use every day, right? And if something is hijacked or cloned, Windows is able to actually see that and provide anti-phishing and anti-malware support by telling, hey, you shouldn't be putting your credentials here. This is an untrusted URL, or it's reputation based. Like, hey, we don't recognize this URL. Is this new? Even though it might look the same, and it'll physically proactively warn you or let you know that it's time to change your credentials because of that. And that goes all the way through to proactively blocking websites inherently bad or malicious.
I love the soup example. Love that.
You like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Cool.
That's the best example I ever could have thought of, right? Like, feel free to steal it. It's all yours, everyone.
So you talked about the virtualization. I actually already kind of hit on the threat detection. The only thing I didn't mention is one of the other things kind of tying back to performance that threat detection enables for customers is it will offload, some of those more aggressive scans from the CPU to the GPU, again, to drive and improve user experience and overall performance. But one of the things that I've not talked about that kind of fits into that application and data protections area is our control flow enforcement technology. And this is something that's available on both Windows 10 and Windows 11. And what it does is, and why it's important is it helps to detect those when bad actors intentionally use good code they replace good code with malicious code, all within the context of a web browser. And why this is important is because it's really hard for EDR applications to detect this from running. So Intel, we detect two different types of these attacks called indirect branch tracking and shadow stack. So we not only proactively monitor, but we also prevent them from running or remediate them in the event that it does run. So you can see here that CET is on Windows 10, Windows 11, but it's also leveraged by Microsoft Office and Windows Edge applications. So again, this is hardware-enabled security that's being leveraged by the different applications and operating systems. So something that you're going to get on any Intel vPro system. From a competition perspective, our competition certainly does a lot with security, but they only provide the shadow stack protection. They don't look at the indirect branch tracking. And again, this is really important when you think about the types of attacks that it's able to prevent and remediate.
So let's we're home stretch here, and I know we'll have some questions, so we'll get to those, which is awesome. The other big thing I wanted to dig into was identity and privacy, because this is also a super hardware related and hardware empowered security. And I really, really, really love the fact that I can just sit down in front of my computer every day and it just unlocks itself and I can get to work. The ability to use my face or fingerprint and being able to get in and out of work via single sign-on has really changed the way that I work, and tons of users have worked all over. So what we can do here is using Windows Hello for Business and using biometrics, which we already talked about, being saved on the hardware itself. We are enabling really strong authentication, no matter where a user might be, into the access and the data that they need to do their job quickly and easily. And we can also control privacy access, not just from an individual device, but from a location. So for instance, if I was, say I'm here in my office, but last week I was traveling, and as I was traveling, I was in a different state, new IPs, whatever it is. So I can still sign in with my biometrics, but the best part is that since we inherently and explicitly always verify, Windows will go, hey, do your two-factor authentication on your phone. Make sure it's you, right? And being able to do that means we're just that much more secure going forward using Windows in conjunction with the device itself and the biometrics that are on there. And then we go, but why? Why do we do this? Why get rid of passwords? Why worry about 2FA? Why do facial recognition? Why have hardware that helps us do all that? It's because, like kind of Chris and I were kidding about earlier, but unfortunately, Us humans are the weakest link in the security platform. We just are. When it comes to just last year, 89% of all web application breaches came from a stolen piece of credential, meaning a stolen password or a phished password. When using two-factor authentication or biometrics using Windows Hello for Business, along with all the encryption that goes on to the individual devices, we are 99.9% successful in blocking these attacks, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. And then I want to hit on one last thing. It's sort of related, not sort of related, but about Windows 11 specifically. And then we'll kind of close out our day here with questions. But I do want to, squash the little bit of mindset that goes on back there that, hey, if I go to a new operating system, my stuff's not going to work. Right. And I know, Chris, you've been around a while. This is not Windows Vista, right? This is not, going and trying to adopt a brand new or Windows 8 for that matter, and trying to adopt a brand new operating system and like, hey, everything I'm running doesn't work anymore, right? It's just not the case.
Hey, I stand by Windows 8 was not that bad.
It's not. Well, 8.1 was wonderful. You're correct.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course, Windows 8.1 was wonderful. What are you talking about? So I loved it. So I think the thing here, though, has to do with compatibility, right? Windows 11 is an evolution of Windows 10. They can be managed together within the same environment, meaning you can have Windows 10 and 11 devices. You can have older Intel processors, newer Intel processors. They will all work simultaneously within the same environment, and they can all be managed together within that same environment. And please, 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 please be rest assured that we are 99.7% compatible with applications from 10 to 11.
I think that's even attestable by one of the things you shared earlier around an 80% reduction in service desk tickets. I get it.
Yeah.
Just kind of ties it together.
It absolutely does, right? And when we think of, we've tested over 1.2 million applications. It's not like, oh, we tested 10 applications and 9 of them work. No, like we're talking about millions and millions and hundreds of thousands of applications that have been tested. And then if for some reason you come across that you are that 0.3% of applications, Microsoft and a dev team at Microsoft will fix it with you for free as long as you're a Microsoft customer. I mean, no brainer, right? I mean, you can't really beat that. And the idea is to make sure we move folks toward Windows 11, toward modern devices, so they can truly realize and empower themselves and their organizations to have the best devices and kind of solutions possible with the world and hybrid work world we now live in. Mm-hmm. And I know Tracy has one more thing to share. Oh, sorry. How Intel is help. Oh, go ahead, Tracy.
We're both clicking. Sorry.
We're both clicking. All right, go for it. No hand.
Hands up. Hands up.
No hand.
Yeah. This is another semi-unrelated, but I still think it's really important because the sustainability, just like security, is really top of mind for so many customers. And certainly Intel, we're hyper-focused on sustainability, and we look at it not just from the operating life cycle, but from the manufacturing all the way through the end of life. And we've got different features and capabilities that we certainly didn't have time to hit on across the entire life cycle. But one thing that's really important to think about that I was actually shocked to learn is that when you think about the carbon footprint of a laptop or notebook device, 80% of that carbon footprint comes from the manufacturing process. So for your customers that are hyper-focused and sensitive to the overall sustainability and things of that nature, that's where Intel is definitely going to be the leader in that space. And we've got a lot of information posted on our website around the overall sustainability and our sustainability goals that you could leverage going forward. And that was it from a vPro perspective. So I think at this point, we're ready for questions.
Yes, so let's answer some questions.
If you guys have any questions in chat, go ahead and answer. Put them in there. I'll highlight the window one more time. One question I wanted to bring up, specifically around the vPro processors. When a customer's looking at a device with a new well, with any Intel processor, how can they tell whether that processor has vPro, and what version of vPro it does have? What is there a call letter for it, or what's the best way to figure it out?
Oh, I feel like this could be a trick question, but I'm going to answer it. So it goes back to
Sure.
what I said at the beginning of the conversation. vPro is so much more than just the processor. It's
Hmm.
an entire platform. So it's, encompasses the wireless, the graphics, the AMT firmware. So you can't just say, I want a 1260p processor, which is vPro capable, and know that you're getting a vPro system. It has to be, vPro in the description. And again, that's going to vary depending on the OEM and how they do it. But you want to make sure that it's and you're going to look at you want vPro Enterprise. So it's not just the
Hmm.
processor, it's the entire system.
So there's an Enterprise and I believe an Essentials version of vPro.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so let me break that down really quickly too. So enterprise is certainly built for enterprise. The essentials is something that we came out with recently to target the smaller businesses that are out there. So it gives them some of the additional security features and a tiny bit of the manageability, but it doesn't give them the full spectrum that you get from the vPro Enterprise.
Awesome.
Great
Uh,
question.
I don't actually have any more questions from the audience. They
Yeah.
must have be overwhelmed by the knowledge they've received today. So, but with that being said, though, great presentation. A lot of awesome information in here. If you guys missed part of this presentation or you want to be able to rewatch it, it will be available later next week. We'll be sending out emails to you guys when it's available on demand. There was also a giveaway. 20 of the people that were here live will have a chance to win a $50 Amex gift card. So the winners of that will be announced probably in about 10 business days from now. So keep your eyes on your inbox for that. And kind of going forward, on October 4th, 2 p.m., we have a webcast doing collaboration with the Microsoft Service Hub and Microsoft Teams. Mitch, I'm gonna sit you out for this one.
Not me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna sit
The
you
teams
out.
guys the teams got the team's team is awesome though.
The
So
Teams team is awesome.
the team they are the team's team. It's amazing, right? Like, hey, let's come up with a name for our teams.
Teams.
Yeah.
Yes,
Teams.
it's not confusing at all.
No, it's almost like the who's on first bit, right? Very
Right.
close.
So I look forward to talking to the person on second base on
There you go.
October 4th,
There
2
you go.
p.m. Guys, if you found this if you found this entertaining and informational, please join us on October 4th at 2 p.m. for that one as well. But with that being said, Mitch, Tracy, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you all the time for the people that were watching, and we hope to see you guys soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.